All right, now let's go behind enemy lines, previewing Week 1, Eagles versus Packers. We've got Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers that's going to help us break it down. What's going on, Peter?
I'm excited. I can't wait for Week 1. The Packers in Brazil, where they have, I don't know if you know this, the Packers are Brazil's team. So this is kind of crazy that this is technically an Eagles home game, when I expect this to be like 60+% partisan support for the Packers, which, I'd much rather, if I'm the Packers, play Philly in Brazil than in Philadelphia. I'll tell you that.
And I'm actually happy to get the Packers Week 1. Maybe they're a little sluggish to come out the gate. We'll talk about it. But let's jump into this thing, man. What is the current state of the Green Bay Packers heading into Week 1?
Excited. They are juiced up for this season. The energy around this team right now is incredible, to the point that you have long tenured beat reporters, guys who are not prone to hyperbole or homerism or gassing up any particular player or team, going, this feels different. This team feels different. Now, does that mean they're going to win the Super Bowl? Of course it doesn't. But it does give you an idea of how this team has turned over in the last 2 years since Aaron Rodgers gets traded to New York. Jordan Love comes in, and they never missed a beat, really. And you see the camaraderie that this team has. They did something that most teams are not willing to do, and that is build solely through youth. Like last year, the youngest passing battery in NFL history, all first and second year players. They didn't do the thing that Houston did and went out and signed a Robert Woods, who's going to take snaps away from Dontavian Wicks or Jaden Reed or Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs or Bo Melton. And if you didn't know, like, 2 of those 3 names or 4 names, I can't blame you, because, Bo Melton was a 7th round pick, and Dontavian Wicks was a day 3 pick, and Romeo Doubs was a day 3 pick. But this is what they have, and it's a really impressive group. They've grown this thing organically together, and they're now ready. I mean, they've done it now. The youngest team ever to win a playoff game. They're like, we're ready to go win a Super Bowl. That's the way that they're thinking about this.
Yeah, it's going to be a really fun division. The Lions, the Bears could be up and coming. We'll see what happens there. But maybe they even have 3 teams in the playoffs. I don't know. That's going to be a really fun division to watch, mostly because I think the offense is really interesting with the Green Bay Packers. This is a team from Week 12 that ranked 2nd best in the NFL in EPA per play. Mm-hmm. I guess the biggest question is, can the Packers offense keep rolling like they did in the second half of last season?
So this is interesting because I had Aaron Schatz from FTN Fantasy on the show last week, I'm not sure exactly when this is going to air, but we had him on earlier this summer, and what he pointed out was, okay, yes, the second half, they're probably not going to sustain that level of play. But for the year, they were 4th in EPA per dropback. For the year, the offense was 6th in DVOA. This was a top 10 offense with all the underlying metrics. So you don't just have to say, oh, well, they're not going to sustain that level of play. No, they're not. They're probably not. But they don't have to. They were so good in the second half that being bad for 5 consecutive weeks in October and November was essentially washed off the slate. And so you land probably where they should land. They were an inconsistent, high variance team last year. Year 2, starting quarterbacks, all these young receivers I mentioned. Year 2 with Matt LaFleur as the play caller with this group. I think it's reasonable to assume they are once again going to be a really, really good offense. And I've said, I think if Christian Watson is healthy, they can be and will be the best offense in the league. I really believe that. Now, that's a big if. He hasn't been healthy in 2 years so far in the NFL, but I think that talent is there, and he makes the geometry of this offense go. The big playability. And Eagles fans, like, not that long ago, that he took that little glance post off a play action concept in the 4th quarter against the Eagles in prime time, and all of a sudden it's a 65-yard touchdown. Like, his big playability is unlike anything else the Packers have. He is the way that this team can level up next year.
That's why I'm happy about getting them Week 1, because of the concerns on the Eagles defensive side. But what's your take on Luke Musgrave, who is widely considered a breakout star, 6'5"? Like, you look at his athleticism, you look at the Eagles linebacking core, which has gotten killed every single year since I've been born, or since the 90s, since Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's put some respect on Jeremiah Trotter's name, but yes.
Absolutely. And it's still an area that has Devin White and Zach Bond, not big fans of them. Zach Bond's more of an edge rusher. Devin White's more of an athlete that really struggles dropping into coverage. Any thoughts on Luke Musgrave?
He was someone who the Packers were incredibly excited about last year. I believe Tom Pelissero called him the biggest fast guy I've ever seen, or the biggest fast guy I've ever seen. I don't remember which, but one of those two superlatives. He doesn't move like other players his size. He was at the Senior Bowl. There was a day he was at the Senior Bowl with Christian Watson, who ran 4.3s. There was a day he was, by the tracking data, like the zebra tracking data, the fastest player on the field in Mobile.
Wow.
There was a day in Packers training camp with Christian Watson, with Romeo Doubs, who ran low 4.4s, Jaden Reed, who the Packers clocked at 4.39, where Luke Musgrave was the fastest pass catcher on the field. His ability to do things that few tight ends can do physically, his ability to stretch the field vertically. I have compared him not to Travis Kelce or George Kittle. He reminds me, in a best case scenario, of Mark Andrews. They love to work Mark Andrews vertically, corner routes, sail, get him down the field and create big plays that way. That's what Luke Musgrave can be. And then Tucker Kraft, who just got activated off PUP as we're recording this, he tore a pec in off-season work, but should be back and ready to go week one. He really stepped up when when Luke Musgrave had a freak internal organ injury and was out 6 weeks. Tucker Kraft stepped up and played awesome. Like, he had a chance to break the tight end receiving record for rookies that Luke Musgrave was on pace to obliterate. And he almost did it in like 7 or 8 games, Tucker Kraft did, as a starter. That's how successful he was in a short stint. So it's not just Luke Musgrave. It's the combination of these two guys. And it's appropriate that, I'm having this conversation on an Eagles show, because there is some similarities, I think, to the Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert comparisons, where you have this one big burly brawler who's also a good pass catcher, and then the other guy who really is more your split him out and let's go see him go to work in the passing game. I think the Packers see that same sort of vision, and I think they're really excited about what this can be.
Yeah, there's definite concerns with that tight end 2 spot with the Philadelphia Eagles. I miss the days of Ertz and Goddard, and a lot of Eagles fans were shocked when they drafted Goddard at the time. I thought they were going to target tight end in last year's draft. It's a major concern considering Goddard just can't stay healthy.
The Eagles were, I just looked it up, the Eagles were 8th worst in defending the middle of the field last year by DVOA. So that's not great. And that speaks to your point. Safeties, linebackers, those continue to be issues, even with the reacquisition of CJ Gardner-Johnson.
Yep. All right, let's roll on to the other side. Biggest matchup to watch between the Packers defense and the Eagles offense.
Ooh, it's hard to pick anything other than Jalen Hurts against a defense that we think is going to play a lot more single high coverage, play a lot more man coverage. And we saw a couple years ago in that game that I referenced, the Christian Watson touchdown game, the Packers played more man coverage in that game than they had most of that season. And Jalen Hurts killed them with his legs. So Jeff Hafley's coming in, playing as much cover one as any coach in college football. Last year, I think they were 5th in cover one rate, despite, Boston College, not exactly the cream of the crop man cover corners going to Chestnut Hill. All due respect to the Golden Eagles. It's just not Ohio State, where he also played a ton of cover one, right? So how are they going to match up? Are they going to dare Jalen Hurts to beat them deep? Hey, here is a single high cover one look. We think we can defend you with Eric Stokes and Jair Alexander on the outside against Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. Are the Packers going to say that? I'm fascinated by what that cat and mouse game is going to look. Or are they going to say, yes, this is how we want to play week in and week out, but against a running quarterback, against a team that the only thing that they were good at offensively last year was hucking that thing downfield. Do you want to invite that? Do you want to dare them to do that? I would much rather play quarters too high and make every 3rd and 8 an absolute battle for this Philly team, because that was where they had issues last year, especially against pressure.
Yep.
And Jeff Hafley is a mad scientist with these designer pressures. No one sent more 6-man pressures last year in college football than Jeff Hafley. They will blitz the daylights out of you. And I think if you're an Eagles fan, that's the scary part of this Packers defense. I think their front can get pressure with 4, but they're going to bring extras. And they drafted Edgerrin Cooper, who is a maniac as a blitzer. I mean, you watch him chase down, Jalen Milroe at Alabama, who is every bit the athlete that Jalen Hurts is. Quay Walker is a 4-4 linebacker with length and chase down ability. And they only draft athletic freaks on the edge. Lucas Van Ness chased down Justin Fields one-on-one last year. Rashawn Gary ran the fastest speed-adjusted 40 time at his weight at 275. He ran like low 4.5s, like a ridiculous size speed athlete. The Packers have the athletes. It's going to be about approach. And so I'm interested to see how they approach it. I wonder if, from a Packers perspective, we're going to be fooled by what we see in that game, because I actually expect a lot more two-shell, a lot more coverage disguise than we're going to see week in and week out, just because I think it plays into how the Eagles want to play anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. I think higher on the Packers defense than some of the things I've read. I think they're very good across the board. I love the Xavier McKinney pickup. That's a guy that I wanted the Eagles to pick up this past offseason. Rashawn Gary's solid. Kenny Clark is solid. And I'm really happy you brought up Edgerrin Cooper. That's a guy that Eagles fans talked a lot about during the draft process. And you got Javon Bullard. I love your second round. That was just, I thought, back-to-back really good picks. How much do you expect those two guys to play year one?
A lot. Right now, Edgerrin Cooper is the nickel linebacker next to Quay Walker. And right now, Javon Bullard is the safety that is seeing the most time next to Xavier McKinney. Now, interestingly, Packers had family night, and they didn't have Carrington Valentine, who's a corner that we expect to play a decent amount on the outside at some point. But so they gave Keyshawn Nixon some run on the outside. He's their normal nickel corner. And Javon Bullard at Georgia played both deep safety and the nickel, played a full season in the nickel for Kirby Smart. Was the MVP of the national championship game, knocked Marvin Harrison Jr. out of that game. And the next year, Kirby Smart said, hey, you were great as a nickel corner. We need you as our last line of defense, playing in the back end at safety. And he said, okay, and was immediately awesome. So he is extremely versatile. I think there actually are a lot of similarities with CJ Gardner-Johnson, someone who, if you need him to man up against a receiver as a safety, he can do that. If you need him to fill from depth in the running game, he is going to come down and he's going to bring lightning in his shoulder pads. And that's what you want from someone who's built like him, 5'10", 205. He's got a thick lower half, willing to come up and hit, which you love that about any defensive back. This is a Packers defensive backfield that will tackle. Xavier McKinney, the best missed tackle rate in the NFL last year. One of the biggest. Jair Alexander at his peak, he's now healthy. He will come up and if you try and run receiver screens to his side, he will blow them up. That is a Carrington Valentine staple too. He will come up and tackle. Eric Stokes will come up and tackle. And so I really like this secondary, the way that they put it together. The versatility is off the charts because Xavier McKinney can play anywhere. Yeah. Strong safety, free safety, overhang. You want to play linebacker a little bit. You want to play nickel. He can do all those things. Well, Javon Bullard, same thing. And Evan Williams, a little bit to a lesser degree, a little bit of a lesser known player at Oregon. He's not just a whiskey, Evan Williams. He's a safety who can play. We saw him play a little bit of dime linebacker, basically, on family night. And so they've got a lot of versatility in this secondary. All the pieces fit together in an interesting way. And even though they're not going to truly disguise coverage, they might show too high and spin a safety. They might show you single high and actually flip who's the single high. because you can put Javon Bullard in the nickel, Xavier McKinney deep, and at the snap, flip them. And those two guys are good enough instinctually, good enough athletically that you can actually feint and recover to get to those places. We saw Javon Bullard do it at Georgia. And the first time I saw it, I was just like, this is defensive nirvana. Like, this is the kind of thing a defensive coordinator just like wakes up in the middle of the night going, oh my God, what if we could do this? Well, the Packers have two safeties that would allow them to do that. So I think Jeff Hafley, whose nickname at Ohio State was the Wizard, he is going to be in the lab the way that we think of Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan dialing up these offensive concepts. He's going to be doing that kind of stuff defensively, and I can't wait to see it.
I think the Eagles are slowly trying to figure that out as well. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, we've seen a lot of Quinyon in the slot this training camp. I
love that draft, by the way, for Philly. The Quinyon Mitchell was like the guy that I was like, if they're going to play press man in Green Bay, that's the guy I want them to go get. If they want a safety who can play the nickel, that's Cooper DeJean. And those were two players that Packer fans were like salivating to be able to get. And the Eagles, the Packers had their chance. They could have taken him, Cooper, in the first round, and didn't. So that's an interesting piece because we heard all offseason that they were really interested in him. He seems like a perfect fit in what the Eagles are trying to do.
Yep. All right. And last question of the night: who is the X factor on the Packers that no Birds fans know enough about, and who can make an impact week one?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, I mentioned his name already, but Bo Melton, former 7th round pick. The Packers have very specific types of receivers that they like to draft. You got to be over 6 feet. You generally have to be over 190. You have to run 4.55 or faster, and you got to be 7 or better in the 3 cone. They like a lot of productivity. Bo Melton checks all those boxes. The first receiver last year, this is crazy. The first receiver last year to get 100 yards for the Green Bay Packers was Bo Melton, and he was a mid-season pickup. In the 49ers game, in the playoffs, they had a designer call, a fake bubble and go for Bo Melton. I think week one, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks were arguing over who's going to be wide receiver 1 for the Packers. Week one, I see as an opportunity for Green Bay to maybe get a little tricky, but run Bo Melton out there. You don't quite have the full scouting report on this guy, and you run some special for him. He can absolutely fly. Low 4.3s. This is not the world's fastest secondary for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they're going to test this defense deep. Even if they're going to play a lot of that Vic Fangio quarters, 2 high safety stuff, make those safeties cover deep. Get into 3 receiver sets, make that safety carry the slot, put Christian Watson there, put Bo Melton there, and you're going to see he's going to make a big play week one, and every Eagles fan is going to go, wait, who?
Love it. All right. Win or lose, Packers versus Eagles. What do you got?
I've been saying all offseason that I don't know why the Packers aren't favored in this game. I think they're the better team. I think this is really a neutral field. I think Eagles -1.5 made sense. If the game were in Philly, it's not. And I think it's going to be partisan for the Packers, which just gives me all the more reason. I think this is a fun game. This is like this has got like 27-30 kind of vibes for me, where a field goal at the end. That was the other name I was going to give you. Anders Carlson and Greg Joseph are in a duel right now in Packers camp for who's going to be the kicker. Greg Joseph made a bunch of kicks a few years ago for the Vikings. It seemed like Anders Carlson was off to a really good start. He's cooled off a little bit. Greg Joseph has stayed steady. So it may be one of those guys ends up being the X factor. Jordan Love drives them down at the end, game-winning field goal. The Brazilian faithful go crazy. I think that would be a really fun way to kick off the season.
All right, man. That is Peter Bukowski. What do you got going on Locked On Packers? Where can we find you, man?
A ton of stuff going on Locked On Packers. Go subscribe over on our YouTube page. Go check us out on YouTube, social medias, all that stuff too. But I understand Philly sports. Maybe you don't want to listen to Locked On Packers. Listen the week of, at the very least, just to get a little, inside look. But I also host a show called Locked On Sports Today. It's all the sports, the big stories that you need to know. Our crew of analysts from around sports, every sport, we got somebody. And so we bring you that daily insight from our local experts every day. It's like the first 15 minutes of Sports Center. It's the biggest stories in under 20 minutes every day. listen on your commute, get caught up, and then you'll be in a good place. It's a really fun show. It's a really good show. I would love for you to go check it out.
Awesome, man. Locked On Packers on YouTube, at Locked On Packers on X. Thanks for joining, Peter.